Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Healthy Podcast. I'm Dr. Jesse Abend,
Hey, and I'm Kathleen Ascanio.
registered dietitian, and we are excited to talk about the keto diet today.
Yeah.
We both found this diet interesting and perhaps very beneficial. So we're excited to talk about it, cover it, summarize it, and perhaps educate you on it and see if it's something you'd be interested in as well.
Yeah, it's definitely picked up a lot in popularity. It's kind of transitioned over the years and had taken on different names, of course, from like low carb, very low carb, Atkins, South Beach, whatever. But it's all the keto diet. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. And you're just looking into it more, doing a little bit more of research, seeing that if you do it the right way, it's a pretty healthy, good way of just altering your eating habits.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like anything else, any other type of diet, you can maybe perhaps you can still eat in a way that would be defined as a keto diet, but it could be an unhealthy way. So there is a healthy and an unhealthy way to go about it, like most other ways of eating.
Yes, definitely.
So do you want to explain what the keto diet is?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I don't know if you knew this, but any dietitian you meet will tell you that the keto diet was originally developed for children with epilepsy. Um, cutting out carbs, I think, or bringing the carbs down to a really low percentage. And I'm not sure of the science behind it, but really helped with like seizure activity. So that's kind of how it came about. So the keto diet is just really a very low carb, high fat, high protein diet. And it forces your body to use fat as a fuel source versus carbs, which it really prefers. So I do want to stress that even though your body can run off of fat and ketones and whatever, your body prefers the glucose, which we get from carbs. So by running off of the fat, it forces your body to go into ketosis. Now, have you ever done a low carb diet?
I mean, perhaps not on purpose, but I think maybe the way I'm eating currently could be considered a low carb diet compared to the standard diet.
Okay. But definitely not as low as like 20 to 50 grams of carbs.
Maybe not.
Okay. So I've never been able to do it longer than like a day. But I that when you reached ketosis, you would be like in this magical state. You could see like rainbows and probably like unicorns, have a great time. But that's not what it's
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go there. Use a vacation.
So apparently like you don't see things and you don't have like perfect vision. You're still the same you, but your body's just in ketosis. So
I like the sound effect.
So your standard keto diet, and I had to double check the numbers on this, consists of 70% to 80% fats, a lot of fat. And then 10 to 20 grams of protein and only 5 to 10% in carbs. And that's really low carb, obviously, considering that normally your diet would be 45 to 50% carbs, which can look like 100 to 200 grams.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost half of what you're taking in is just carbohydrate in the standard diet. And you're saying keto is on or the standard keto diet is recommending about 5% carbohydrate.
Yeah. So it's pretty low. And that kind of translates to about 50 grams of carbs, which is not a lot. Not all.
So a big difference coming from someone who's eating the standard American typical diet, and then you want to switch over to keto. So that's a big drastic difference to keep in mind.
It is, yeah. So to put that in perspective, 50 grams of carbs is 2.5 cups of raspberries, 1.5 cups of blueberries, maybe 3 small slices of bread, a couple potatoes, like a couple small potatoes, like 4 cups of cherry tomatoes. So kind of a lot of cherry tomatoes if you like them, but I wouldn't use on my potatoes. So yeah, like I said, it's just not a whole lot compared to what normal people are eating.
Yeah, it's not a lot. I think I had that last night. I had like a good amount of blueberries. That would have been it for the
Yeah,
day.
that's it, maxed out.
All right. So yeah, thank you for putting that into perspective, because it shows really it's not many carbohydrates at all that we're used to. Big difference.
Yeah. Um, so what can we eat on keto? You know,
Do I have
do you,
to just, melt butter and just sip on a cup of hot butter all day long? Is that what keto is?
that's what it sounds like. And I think people like to make it like that. Drink your melted butter. Well, I mean, or you were primarily looking at animal protein, because we've talked about it before, where we can get plant-based protein, but there's a lot of carbs in plant-based protein, beans, legumes, things like that. So we're really nixing all of those out. And so you're kind of left with animal protein.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, all fats. So your animal fats, nuts, seeds, butter, oils, avocado. And again, you can have some carbs, but just not very many.
So it's you're going to be consuming more animal products, it seems like, if you are going to be going the keto diet way.
Yes, and I'm sure you could do it. I'm trying to think. It would be very, 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 very difficult to meet all your needs doing it in a plant-based way.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's possible.
I'm kind of don't think so, unless you're a pescatarian.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, but eating fish.
Yeah, it's still
difficult.
I wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't recommend that.
All right, so you'd have to be okay with consuming animal based products if you want to eat the keto diet.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So that's a good breakdown. Now, I when I was looking into it, first, I guess going back into, it's important to kind of go over quickly, like how our bodies, use fuel and the preferred energy sources. So, right, we use carbs or fat, essentially. Carbohydrates, like most of us are, used to eating. It's a typical American diet. Most of our food is, unfortunately, carbohydrates. We have a lot of bread in our diet, a lot of sodas, sugary beverages, snacks, grains, what we all know we typically consume. And so these carbohydrates that we consume are then converted into glucose, and our body breaks glucose down and turns it into energy very quickly, which is why our body, craves it and can be addicted to it, because we can use it up right away. The problem with that is we can overconsume it. Any extra carbohydrates or glucose that we consume then turns into fat, and that leads to obesity and overweight, and also causes many other diseases, including type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, liver disease. Really, most of the chronic diseases that we see comes from an excess intake of processed, refined carbohydrates. Now, there is another fuel source that we can run off of, and this is what the keto diet tends to promote and talk about, which is fat as fuel. Now, our body can't break down fat as quickly as carbs, which is why we don't always crave fat as much as we do carbohydrates. However, it essentially is like a slow, steady process. Our body can only store so many carbohydrates until it has to run out. But fat, we almost have an unlimited amount because we can store so much of it. And once our body can essentially switch on to breaking down fat and using that as a more of like a sustainable energy source to keep us going.
Yeah. So I think the whole mechanism behind the switches and the conversions, and it really is little pieces here and there. It's so nuts. It's so crazy to think about. And all of that just happens inside your little body. It's great.
we are so complex, so absolutely incredibly complex. Life is incredible. Yeah, very interesting. And we don't really know everything about it, but we do understand this. So when we do now switch to mostly of a fat-based, fat-based and protein-based diet, now our body, instead of taking in these carbohydrates that we can use instantaneously, is now we have to sort of break down fat, and that takes some energy in itself. So people often see when they do first start, switching over to the keto diet, they start seeing weight loss. One, initially because, like we all know, carbohydrates, when it's stored in our body, it contains some water with it as well. So typically people will find they'll lose a significant amount of weight initially because they're losing carbohydrate and that water weight, and then it starts to level off. And then your body tends to start adapting to now breaking down fats, and it can become more efficient at it. And you don't necessarily have those sugar crashes. You can become more stable throughout the day, energy wise. And then, your brain can use ketones, and there's some research saying maybe that's a preferred energy source. So there's some, good research perhaps out there.
Yeah, and definitely research is picking up on the keto diet, I think, just because of the popularity of it. But one thing that we don't really know is the long term. We don't know what, if any, long term effects are, because this really started picking up in the 80s, 90s. And so you're looking at these people who were like 20, 30, and again, how long are they really maintaining this diet? So I know that's one thing we'll talk about is the sustainability, and then also some of the side effects that come along with it. So, and one thing I want to mention is the keto flu. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes. So when I was doing the research, yes, I did come across this, but you can please explain this.
Yeah. So the keto flu, it's just typically when they start doing keto, I think it has a lot to do with all the glycogen and water leaving the body, and it's just like kind of sudden, and then you kind of feel tired, lethargic, and it's just chills, some like flu-like symptoms for a couple days while your body's like transitioning, I guess. And I guess that's why I thought it was gonna be like magical, because you go through the keto flu and then you get on the other side of it and you're like, ah, but it's not. So, I mean, if I could see a unicorn, I'd do it, but
there are some other ways you can see unicorns, I think. That's another podcast
yeah, that's a whole nother type of food.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your body's kind of just like in transition. And so it's like feeling all cruddy, but then you kind of, adjust and then you're fine. And I think drinking plenty of water and electrolytes can kind of help like mitigate some of that. But I think it's just interesting that you kind of go through this little period of ick, and then all of a sudden, I guess you go into ketosis.
Yeah, it typically takes some time again, if we're not used to eating a certain way, you need a little adaptation period, and your body, like you said, is like, what's going on? This is not normal, and you lose some electrolytes, you become dehydrated, and you feel sick. And then exactly like you said, you switch. Now your body starts realizing, all right, we're not getting the carbohydrates. We don't have this energy. We have to start switching over to our other energy source. We have to start using our bank that we've been saving up for years and years. And many of us have a very large fat bank that we can now live from.
Yeah. And let me tell you one thing about your body. Your body is always preparing for a crisis. So it loves to have a nice, healthy savings in the bank that it can pull from any moment. So that's kind of why we gain weight in stressful situations, or when we're not sleeping well, because your body's like, this is it. This is the crisis. And it's like, I want to make sure I am prepared in any scenario. So, I guess, even transitioning from, what you were eating to the keto diet, your body's like, no, the bank, in crisis mode. So yeah, your definitely needs a minute to adjust.
Yeah, that's a very important point to bring up. The evolution of how we've come to survive, understanding the evolutionary biology, essentially. is that, fat, we've developed a way to store energy for later uses if ever came a period of starvation, because that's what we had to deal with, a long time ago. Now, not so much. Now we never really use our bank. We're very greedy. We don't like to spend our fat because we have so much, quick carbs just to use. We never even have to go into the bank. And although we may be very rich, we become very unhealthy. That's an interesting philosophical point as well. It's like, it's almost like excess of anything kind of always tends to lean towards disease and destruction.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right about that.
And what I like about the keto diet is now we get to not be so greedy, and we can start using our fat as fuel and have purpose for all of that savings now, instead of just hoarding it and becoming sick with gluttony, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think, like I said, I don't think the keto diet is necessarily bad. I think with all diets, it's going to be difficult, and I don't think you should do it long term. But I think if you're doing it properly, and of course, like you have somebody who's like you're working with, and that they can monitor you and make sure there's nothing going wrong. Then I think it can be very beneficial, especially if you're kind of just looking for that transition to like, okay, I just kind of need to like restart, redo. I'm going to do this for a little bit, and then like work on my eating habits overall. I think then it can be very beneficial, of course. But also knowing that there can be some side effects. One of them is constipation. And I think it's just, you're cutting out so many fibrous foods, which really helps the bowel and your movements, that, you're cutting all of that out. And it's unfortunate, but yeah, just make sure you drink plenty of water and move. Hopefully that'll kind of help.
Yeah, and perhaps it takes some time to adapt now to the foods that you're eating for your bowel to transition over to functioning differently, essentially. But perhaps it is a long-term side effect because the keto diet may be advocating for cutting out foods that also provide health benefits and fiber.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I know there's people who have done it for a really long time, and I think 50 grams of carbs, I think that's really, really low. And even bumping that up to a little bit higher while still being lower carb, I think that's more realistic to do on a day-to-day basis and still get a lot of the benefit that you need from all of those fibrous foods. And, we're not talking about just fiber. There are some other nutrients like magnesium, phosphorus, some of the B vitamins, vitamin C's, which of course you can get through supplements, and I think it's easier to add those in versus fiber. But anytime you're cutting out a food group, you run the risk of deficiencies in some respect.
Losing some benefits of potentially beneficial food group. Yeah, I would say, I like the overall. So I got to wait for my dog to stop barking. He had a lot to say about the keto diet. I think Charlie is mostly keto.
Yeah, is he?
Yeah, my dog is mostly keto. He enjoys his steaks. He doesn't like the carbohydrates so much.
Okay.
He likes the low carb veggies and fruits. So yeah, I think Charlie's all about the keto.
Yeah, if I think about it, Brody is too. He likes meat. He won't touch a banana. So.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, the dogs have the final say.
Yeah, that's it. Everybody be keto because your dog said so.
Yeah, so I like the overall premise of the keto diet. I mean, it encourages essentially healthy foods, cutting back on processed, refined carbohydrates. I think that's right. We always look at all these diets, and in the end, they're all saying the same thing. Now, I think these diets can always lead into like this extremist way of going about it. Yeah. And that's where I think that's probably for some people, a minority of people. But typically, if you take, I think what I always take out of it is like the overall bigger picture is just not eating the way that we currently eat now in America. It's just reducing our refined carbohydrate intake, eating more whole foods, and And that typically is lower carb, higher fat and protein, which translates into the keto diet. Now, again, you can always take it extreme and become very strict with it, which I wouldn't recommend for most people. I would just say, look at the bigger picture here. It's advocating a healthy way of eating. Don't be too obsessed with, I guess, your ketone levels, I would say, for the average person.
Yeah. And you mentioned it before, a soda that's sweetened with sugar is a carb, where also you have quinoa, which has so many benefits to it. It's a grain. It's got protein and tons of vitamins and minerals. That's also a carb. But if you're looking at, which carb is probably more ideal for your body, it's going to be the quinoa versus that one. So one thing I don't necessarily like about the keto diet and most diets is that they kind of like lump it all into one and say, okay, no, that's bad. Where you're actually like, no, but this is great, and same thing with like fruit. Even fruit is phenomenal, tons of fiber and vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and things like that. And while you can have some, it's very limited. And I would hate for someone to be like, oh, I can't eat that because it's got carbs in it. And, especially if that's what you want versus like a Snickers bar, where although it's tasty, it satisfies you in the moment. But, if you're looking at the nutrients, well, obviously the fruit is going to have higher nutrients and more fiber and just more benefit for the body,
Yeah. That's an excellent point, in that you're lumping, as if typically people, we talk about carbohydrates, we're lumping all of these foods together, and it's a spectrum of carbohydrate. And really what I think any diet is trying to say is avoid the refined processed carbohydrate, which is essentially just one nutrient, and that's just sugar. Whereas if you eat these vegetables, which are mainly carbohydrate or fruit, they're also providing you with a lot of other nutrients that are important for health. And they are providing you with sugar as well, but the balance of the nutritional content is much better in these whole foods, and they can be healthy. They can be a healthy part of your diet. And it doesn't mean you have to break your keto way of eating. But you shouldn't just exclude all carbohydrates, because they're not all the same.
Right. They're not. And like I said, it's just kind of evaluating like, what do I need in the moment, and I think, like I said, that's just life and the way we eat. And I think another thing about keto is, I think some people look at it and they're like, yes, I get to eat bacon every day. And then I get to go and eat fried chicken, and I get to have a big steak for dinner. And yes, but also I think that's also probably the way of, not the best way to do keto, because again, you're packing on major calories, you're packing in major saturated fat. And I've said it before, that's the one that's not good for your heart, not good for your brain. And then what are we doing here? Like, great, you cut out carbs, but what are you adding? And that will have the opposite effect, where you'll probably maintain your weight, if not gain. And then you'll start to see the increase of like cholesterol, blood pressure, and so on. Whereas some people who have actually lost weight on keto diet have seen a reduction in those things as well, likely secondary to the weight loss. So, I mean, like I said, doing it the right way, if you're going to do it. And then again, considering the sustainability of it. How long are you going to be doing this? How long can you realistically do it? Because you have to eat forever, technically, so it's like, how long are you willing to do this? And how long can you do it? Is it worth it to do it forever? What are we really missing out on? Or what are you giving up? Versus like, what can you change? Like, am I able to cut out sodas? Am I able to increase like whole grains and reduce the refined sugars? If I can do that and live a happy life while eating, then that might be a better route.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to go full out keto or say I'm changing my lifestyle tomorrow, but I think it's more of just realizing the really good message that the keto diet, I think, or at least is included in the way of eating in the keto fashion, is just excluding those unhealthy processed foods, essentially, and really not going all in the keto lifestyle. Which again, I think there's a specific population of people who do enjoy that, and perhaps it's good for them. But for most of us who are so used to eating in our own typical standard way, going to one extreme is usually always a bad idea and not sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think all roads always end up back here. And that's at least what I find, in my opinion. And I may be wrong, but it's essentially just, I always get to see the good points of all these types of ways of eating. And it's really just limiting. I mean, how many times am I going to repeat this in this episode and all the other episodes? Is limiting the processed, preserved, artificial, all these foods that we're so used to consuming, and just eating more whole, healthy, nutrient diverse foods without subscribing to a certain lifestyle. Even though it's fun, you're a part of something, you're a part of a community, and perhaps that is also helpful to people to maintain a healthier way of eating, is being part of a community, which is why I think these diet lifestyles are so popular. But if we could all maybe step back and just take a more sustainable approach, and realizing that what all of these types of lifestyles are essentially saying is just leave out the processed foods, we would all be much healthier, and we would be able to sustain our diets for much longer.
Yeah, exactly.
So what would you say, to someone who is going to go to you and say, Coach Kathleen, I like to go keto?
I would definitely meet somebody where they're at. It's if you want to try it, great, let's do it. But again, let's see how we can do it the right way. And like I said, how can we more so ease into it rather than just flip the switch? Because I think, again, flipping the switch is just not ideal. But how can we gradually lower the carbs and even maybe not even get to full keto like you were talking about, but maybe just how can we start cutting out those refined sugars, or where can we make those changes to like bring it down to a more moderate level? Again, I do think 50 grams of carbs a day is really low. But how can we bring it down to if you're eating 400 grams, how can we bring that back to a more moderate consumption, and increasing the whole foods, the nutrient dense and fibrous foods that we need.
Yeah, I think it's another common sense approach. That's the way I would go about it too, and I completely agree. And a lot of people may get infatuated with the idea of asking, I want to track my ketones. I want to see my blood ketone level every day. I think they have devices and measurements that people can do every day, and they do that. You can certainly get involved and obsessed. And I get that can help some people because it becomes something, becomes a part of who you are and you really enjoy doing it. But I think that's a minority of people, to be honest. I think most people are not going to be able to sustain that level of monitoring and obsession, and they're going to end up falling back into their old ways. And they're going to be saying, oh, why didn't another diet work for me? And nothing's ever going to work. And that's because it's just always so extreme. It's not sustainable, doesn't really fit into our lifestyle, current lifestyle, and our way of eating.
Exactly. So kind of just taking it like we say all the time. And even when I do, as healthy coach, is like, where can you make the change? Right? If I'm drinking soda every day, am I able to cut that out? Is that realistic for me? That's going to make a difference in my day-to-day calorie intake. And if I'm trying to lose weight, that's going to help. You know what I'm saying? Or if I'm just eating gobs of donuts, like obviously cutting that out and switching it out for something healthier is going to help me lose weight. So I do 100% agree that keto diet is not for the vast majority of the population. And as I've been sitting here, I'm thinking it's also probably really expensive. Especially now with how prices have increased. And again, if you're wanting to do it the right way, in the healthiest way, you're looking at a lot of high ticket items. So like avocados and nuts and lean proteins, that's going to get pricey. So it's honestly probably cheaper to cut out the soda.
Yeah.
Charlie agrees.
Charlie's all happy about it as well. He's agreeing with you. Yeah. And, I always recommend against going from 0 to 100. So if you are saying, I want to start making a change to my lifestyle, to my weight, I want to start preventing disease, I want to get overall healthy, just got to take it slow. I know we're all going to get super excited, and we just saw like these awesome TikTok, videos or YouTube saying, you're going to look amazing in a week if you start eating this way. And you really have to use all your strength and stay patient and just say, no, I'm not going to fall for that again. And I'm going to do it the right way. I got to take it slow, be patient. And I'm not looking ahead a week from now. I'm not looking ahead a month from now. I'm looking a year, 2 years into the future, and I'm seeing myself a healthier person then. I'm going to be healthy in 2 years. And that's extremely difficult to do because it takes a long time. But if you can stay healthy now for a year, 2 years, that's when you've ultimately made a legitimate change.
Yes.
And with that said, I think we'll end it here. This is a great discussion. Thank you for all the information. I had a great time learning about it. And I think people who listen to this will have as well.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
I'll see you on the next one, Kathleen.
Bye.